So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Bridget Irene, who is going to be facilitating this conversation for us. She is from Montfort University in the UK. I hope that I pronounced that properly. But can you clap for her?
Yeah.
Financial inclusion is not just about having access to bank accounts. It's about creating enabling environments where women can thrive. It's about access across Africa. Why is women's participation in economic activity crucial for societal progress and development? I'll start with you.
So as Absa, we have a strategic mission to be active consumer. And that work we do through the sustainability framework that is impact on financial inclusion as well as diversity and inclusion. In addition to that, in 2023, we came out and said we wanted to be the bank of the entrepreneur. And with that, we wanted to focus on women and people without delivering. Why did we choose women? We chose women because we noticed that they made up a majority in many of the markets where we operate, and make up the majority of the population. However, their participation in the economies was not commensurate to the number that they ended up. In addition to that, we noticed that there was a 42% gap of funding for women. There's also the fact that women make up 60% of informal economies. In fact, in other markets, it's 19%. Right? Women are also most likely to be the ones that start and operate businesses that also deliver social value and social benefits in countries as well as the communities we operate. And lastly, as the door of the dream, and lastly, women with our areas that they work, they are likely to invest it back into communities. So for us, it became clear looking at the data that if we wanted to achieve sustainable social-economic impact, we wanted to unlock the assets that sits within townships, within economies, as well as rural areas, as well as break down the systemic barriers, we had to choose one. It's also really a platform that's been running for a long time. But we knew that it was urgent, we knew that it was time for us to get into it if we really wanted to be elected for small markets moving forward.
Thank you for that answer. And then, why is women's participation in economic activity and why choose women?
As a woman myself and as a mother, I think we can go other way. But thank you and good morning, and thank you for having me on the panel. At Womhub, we're an ecosystem enabler, really thinking about how it is that, and implementing how it is that we support girls and women right through the value chain to see them thrive and create economic activity that they so need in our context. And I think that's probably the answer to the question, is that it's not, it makes sense not only from an economic perspective, but from a socio-cultural perspective as well. You know, I think before you raised some really interesting stats, but at a base level, it's kind of the stuff that we know so well, but we need to do something about, and that is that women make up over half of the population, but more importantly, make up over 80% of the buying decision-making powers in economies, particularly in our context. And they run informal businesses and start informal businesses at a higher rate than men. And so when you start putting all of those things together, it makes absolute sense that we start catalyzing those economic accelerators, because that's the sustainable change we're going to need. In addition to that, I think, you know, when we look at where we're wanting our country to go, the I think responsibility and obligation we all have is to bring in diversity that women bring into our economies, into our financial systems, and into our business landscape, because that's going to help us solve the problems of the future, and I think the innovation that is required to think about some of our economic and contextual challenges that we face on the continent in our country and probably in the globe at large. Very personally, because the work we do is focused on women, I think we also sit in a world where you could almost feel that it's becoming more polarized. And so there's even more of an incentive to say, actually this work is now no more about talking, as the previous panel said as well, and it's about doing. And I think it is around creating equal platforms where there is access for all of us to be able to thrive in the business spaces in which we want to play. And that is not at the exclusion of men. It is a joint conversation so that we really ignite the economy and the financial systems that we need for prosperity moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bridget, for the question. When you look at our sector, the agriculture, because we work a lot with farmers, one may be correct to say women are already participating, and we're actually participating in greater numbers than men. For example, whether you're talking about the workforce or farmers themselves, women will make more than 60%. When you talk about buying decision, Anjani is talking about, we make more than 80% decisions when it comes to that. But then when someone asks another question, at what level are we participating? For example, those 60% women farmers, how many of them own the land they're farming on? How many of them own bankable assets that they can leverage for funding? How many of them sit at the decision making at fresh produce market? I know a lot of agencies, out of a team of 30, they'll have like 2 women that have multiple degrees, but they're only doing administration jobs and they're not invited at the seat when the decision of whose produce must be bought, they're not invited there. And then when you look at the workforce as well, are those real jobs or are they poverty jobs? How many of people that work in our industry can buy cars and have it financed? How many can buy houses? How many can they take their children to the schooling of their choice? Then you quickly realize that we are participating very passively at the margins of the economy instead of coming to the middle. So participation should include that. It's not only just important, but the level of participation as well is very crucial. So if we are talking participation and we can't take it to the bank, it's not bankable, then there's a lot of work that still needs to be done.
Good morning, thank you for having me on the panel. I agree with everything the panelists, fellow panelists have said thus far. I think when you're looking at including women more into the financial ecosystem, it makes stronger and more inclusive economies. So data shows us in societies where women have equal opportunity to men, those societies typically have less conflict, they have better health systems, they have better education as compared to those that actually don't. We've seen in the last couple of years the rate at which women-owned businesses are growing is really outpacing that of men-owned businesses. The African continent has the most number of women-led entrepreneurs in the world. So when you look at it, 1 in every 4 women are either starting a business or they're managing a business. Yet they face significant challenge when it comes to things like access to finance, access to mentorship, capacity building, training. At the same time, we know, and I think one of the panelists mentioned, there is a huge financing gap that sits between what women get versus men. And so we have to bridge that gap because there's economic value on that. We see a report that says that in order to move towards gender equality for both employment and entrepreneurship, you have the opportunity to impact the global GDP by as much as 20%. So at Visa, we really financially include more women. And when we enable more women entrepreneurs, it really is a catalyst and it's an accelerator for both economic growth and societal progress. Because we see again, most women invest up to 90% of what they make back into their families, into nutrition, into taking care of the communities. So in short, when you enable women entrepreneurs, we don't just enable one business. You enable a family, you enable community, and ultimately you have economic impact from a country perspective. I'll also make one more point. I think that access to finance is critical, but so is education, so is mentorship, and I think building the networks that connect experienced, seasoned entrepreneurs to those who are aspiring to open up businesses is quite critical. So collaboration between private and public sector really becomes important.
Thank you very much. I want to take this in another direction. So we all know barriers that women face, and there's a lot of research, there's a lot of conferences and talk going on around it. But just like you mentioned, we need to go beyond talking to do. So I'd like to hear from you what your organizations have been doing in order to support women. So let's start from you.
These systemic barriers books, some that are overt and technical and have been spoken about when it comes to doing. We have to us from financial solutions that are really just looking at from the unique dynamics that they have to operate in challenges to the fact that they don't have assets that they need to provide collateral, they have limited financial literacy, and others are nuanced, such as the ridiculous questions really that are asked to women when they require help, financial help for their businesses or the amount that is decided on to be offered to them. So women need exactly the same things that men need. They need networks, industry insights, they need intention of growth and development, they need access to markets, as well as access to finance that women need. So financial services and financial institutions need to undertake an overhaul of the way that they approach financing of women, so that they position themselves to one, be able to respond, as well as mitigate the barriers that are being experienced by women. I mentioned earlier that we are positioning ourselves as the back of the entrepreneur, and we do this work throughout our full ecosystem of work. Starting from a social impact perspective with the corporate citizenship, where we undertake entrepreneurial education with young people and women. We would drive entrepreneurial mindset as well as entrepreneurial intent, because we understand the role of entrepreneurship in growth of economies as well as countries. We want to fundamentally move people away from thinking of employment as a participation in economies to entrepreneurship. And then we go to supply development, where we have a fundamental focus on women through procurement. In fact, some of our investment clients within corporate investment banking trust us with a fund that enables them to deliver on their ESG projects as a key partner to them. And then within relationship banking, we have enterprise development, which needs the businesses where they are. I know that entrepreneurs feel like they're overtrained. They feel like some entrepreneurial programs or entrepreneurial development programs assume that they are at foundational stages, whereas they have moved and find themselves in other places. So within Absa, we're clear that our enterprise development approach meets the businesses where they are. Could be a foundational phase where you just have an idea, or you've grown now in your time, we are ready for a step change, we are ready to start trading internationally. One of the stories that we're always very excited to share is that of leading sanitary pads. 8 years ago, when she came to us, she just had an idea and said that women do not participate in the value chain of sanitary towels, whereas they are the consumers of it. And we were able to work with Jane with leading point of inception, and I'm happy to share that now, ages later, Lindy is still part of our enterprise development program. She has a 4,000 square meter factory along the Mpho, and she prints 800 pads per minute. So we want to be journey with her from inception of idea. There are others such as clothing, again within our enterprise development program, who had already been operating, but she was ready for the global market, and we were able to help her be part of the new fashion markets, and the biggest fashion market and her stories that we can share from that. So we nurture exactly what is we also don't assume generation technical. Coming to products and solutions, practicality. In September 2023, within our relationship banking portfolio, we launched a product called She Thrives. Remember we said earlier that one of the barriers is that we assume that women know the same things from financial services as we do, whereas they have completely different dynamics. So with She Thrives, we wanted to prioritize women and we wanted to give them a head start. So with the She Thrives program, we were able to say, if we give you funding, you will not have to pay initiation fees. We're going to waive any fees for the first 6 months. We're going to give you up to 35% off short-term insurance. We're going to give you a cash flow letter. So this is a technical product that is targeted at women-owned enterprises, keeping in mind that they are coming from a different, fundamentally different, from a benefit, essentially, something like that, and trying to accelerate their inclusion. Then there's the Africa Growth Fund, which enables us, we've spoken about collateral, and the fact that women don't always have assets that enable them to put down the collateral. Through partnerships with organizations such as the African Development Bank, we have the Africa Guarantee Fund, where we are then able to stand in that gap and say that we understand that you don't have collateral, we will guarantee up to 75% of the loan that you have to take. So some of the things that we're excited to be offering, and as I said, we had to undertake an overhaul of the way that we do business.
I think it's in the name. So at the heart of it, we are so focused on supporting and developing women. And so all of our programs are run for women with the intention of, as I said earlier, creating an equal platform and equal access. And the way in which we do that is really what we say is supporting the value chain around girls and women in STEM, from attraction, and that is creating early pipelines where girls are making decisions about their futures, right through to business development, business growth, and then ultimately financing and exit. And that's the programmatic and capacity building work that we're extremely proud of, and encourage everyone to visit our stand outside to learn more. But I want to talk more around, I think, what some of the standout components are that we're doing, just conscious of time. And I want to focus on 3 specific aspects that I think are so relevant as part of this conversation, to support women and as it was said, to think about how it is that they actively participate in the systems. And the one is that through our programs, what we've learned is that we need to recognize, embrace, and support the fact that women don't want to emulate men, they want to bring their true selves to who they are and how they participate with their businesses and grow their businesses and economies. And so understanding the burden of care that we carry as nurturers, as carers, as great mothers, as great wives, as great sisters, is really important. It comes with an aspect of psychological trauma that can't be denied. And so each and every one of our programs talks to that process around understanding self as an entrepreneur, as you build a business. and thinking about what that impact has on how you build your business out. And that again talks to, as Lineshree mentioned, that the business that the female entrepreneurs build is not only for themselves, it actually has full communities and ecosystems themselves. The second component I wanted to talk about is the understanding, so financial inclusion, and again, as Lineshree said, is not only about access, it's also about education and understanding. And what we learned was that there's a lot of focus on access to capital, but many founders were taken on the journey to understand the difference between managing finances and then understanding capital needs for growth. And so we've introduced elements of financial coaching, which is one-on-one partnership and journey actually around business entrepreneurs who need different things from different people. And financial coaching allows them to really understand what is my income statement telling me, what is my cash flow situation, what does my runway look like, so that I can understand my capital and growth needs better. And coupled with that, there is a real deep understanding of what the capital needs are, so that when they're in rooms like this, they challenge and say, this is why venture capital won't work for me, because I understand my needs, and actually I can then approach an Absa or a development bank and say, this is what I'm looking for, what would better suit those needs. And thirdly, I think is technology enablement, and it's really around helping entrepreneurs understand that at a base level, technology can significantly help them tackle some of their overheads that they sometimes feel are barriers to operating in economies. And so that is around understanding the vulnerability when it comes to cybersecurity, but also thinking about how new technologies can enable and advance and simplify some of their business processes in a cost-effective and accessible way. And so I think those are the kinds of things we need to think about, continually regenerating, challenging, and building from our entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, apart from our programs, I think what's super important to me is that once you develop women, and we've had this conversation a number of times, once you develop female entrepreneurs, you realize that they're not looking for handouts. They're not looking for, that's a wonderful project or initiative. They are looking to build and grow serious businesses. And so access to network, access to market, and access to financing that works for them is something that we need to provide to them as ecosystem enablers on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
Your sector is one sector that women are high players, but they're under-recognized. Their contribution is not well very recognized. They're not getting the credit they deserve. What is your organization doing to support women in agriculture?
Thank you so much for your question. So access to market is one of those things that are very much important. Like Anjani was mentioning earlier, we have built, like one of the things that we're going to be doing very soon, in about 8 weeks, we're going to be launching some analytics features on our application. And I was telling my team, and it took very long for us to build them, because I was like, we're not building cool stuff. It's cool to build cool stuff, but we are building business tools that speaks to access to market and speaks to financial inclusion, meaning that we need to build them to collect data that is needed when a bank is assessing risk, when a big buyer or international buyer of fresh produce, what are they looking for in terms of compliance and food safety, so that we can know that if a farmer that is a female is with us for a year, are we helping them to get closer to trade finance, to exporting, so that they can stand on their own and no longer need any empowerment? Maybe they can even empower others.
Thank you. And finally, to you, Lineshree. I understand that this cannot work without partnerships and collaborations. So what is Visa doing to build this ecosystem to support women?
Sure. I'll speak about it in two parts. I think I'll start with the collaboration and the partnerships, both the public and the private sector. So maybe I'll start from a Visa perspective. Core to our purpose is to include more people into the financial ecosystem and to accelerate digital payments in an environment because we know that when we do accelerate digital payments and financial inclusion, we actually lift the GDP of an economy. And so we work across the ecosystem on partnerships, and I'll speak about women entrepreneurs. We absolutely, I mentioned earlier, we see enabling women entrepreneurs as a catalyst and an accelerator for really, improving economies as well as driving positive societal change. So our She's Next partnership is our global advocacy program run across the world. And it's the second time we had it in South Africa last year. But we really looked through that program to say, one, how do we create funding, so access to funding for women entrepreneurs? And then the second part of it is, how do we ensure that we create sustainable business growth? And that's done through things like capacity building, training, and mentorship, which I think is actually quite critical. And we see through that program, women are not just participating in the innovation agenda, they actually lead it. And solving for really pressing challenges like environmental sustainability, to creating marketplace ecosystems from an agriculture perspective to infrastructure. So a lot of very innovative ideas, and women need the platform to be able to communicate this. I think eFama has been an excellent example of this through last year's edition. The second one is we formed a partnership through AfriLabs and the Grasa Michelle Foundation. We launched a program called REVA, which really looked at how do we take 500 early stage startup women-led businesses and put them through a process of training, financial education, and capacity building. What was also done through that program was to provide access to certain of those businesses of about $10,000. And we see through this, you're actually creating long-term sustainability and an understanding of what it takes to grow a business. And I think the last one I will mention is our partnership with iFund who provides microloans and grants to women-owned businesses, and here we've actually had a partnership as well. So we partner across the ecosystem to really activate female-led entrepreneurs. Second one is technology. We really believe that technology is a key enabler, and it can reduce a lot of barriers that we see. E-commerce for us is something that we believe can remove barriers of high setup costs, high physical infrastructure costs. But more than that, it also provides access to small businesses, not just to the geographies in which they operate, but cross-border to other countries as well. We launched a survey in market called the value of acceptance. So that's really what is the value of digital payments for SMEs. And of all the SMEs that we surveyed, 2/3 of them, as well as 60% of consumers say they prefer card payments. About 80% of all businesses that were driving e-commerce said they now accept digital payments. And about 2/3 of all the merchants have also said that they've seen increased footfall as well as increased revenue. So the power of digital payments beginning to gain recognition. And it's not just about the digital payments. Once you bring people into the financial ecosystem, you start to see the transactions that go through. And when you have that transparency, then you have the ability, for financial institutions like an Absa or fintechs to look at how do you now provide access to funding to allow these businesses to grow and scale. On one side is the partnerships, and the other side is really enabling digital payments in an environment.
Thank you. So what are the key financial barriers and identifiers for women and other marginalized gender, and how can institutions such as this help to provide equity the finance access to them?
I've been able to have in the previous conversation about how we were able to overhaul the ecosystem from a social impact perspective, from procurement as well as partnerships. I say that for us, partnership will scaled impact. It means that we are able to accelerate action. It means that we are also able to expand our reach. It means that through a leverage of resources and expertise, we are able to achieve more and I have to highlight a few partnerships that we have entered into. Go back to the African Guarantee Fund, or more wholly, a partnership with the African Development Bank, which through the African Guarantee Fund has enabled us to be able to offer guarantees, as I say, 75% guarantees to women entrepreneurs, but it's also been able to give us an opportunity to give non-financial support to women entrepreneurs. Last year, we were able to launch an Absa business school, which was the curriculum of the Domestic Partnership with the AFDB, as well as the Graduate School of Finance and Business. In January, we also facilitated 5 SME ladies funding seminars again at the different stages that the businesses find themselves in. Then there's a partnership that Lineshree spoke about, one of our greatest prides in our partnerships together. These are She's Next, which eFama, Kubyane, and Nhlabathi are the beneficiaries of really just intentional as the two organizations to give women-owned enterprises the 3 things that they need, just like men-owned or run enterprises: network industry insights, growth or practical skills of business, as well as access to finance and markets. Through that partnership, we were able to get access to markets and recruiting women and men, as well as innovators, and we were able to be part of the first Learning Week that we executed in partnership with the South African Presidency, the Department of Small Business, as well as DECO, to expose them to the entrepreneurial or business landscape in another market, as well as opportunities of trading there, exposing them to investing. And I'm excited to share that the women-owned businesses are able to earn some really significant opportunities out of that family, which I'm very excited to share, and I encourage everyone to look at, is that to make sure that we instill the entrepreneurial culture and start as early as possible to instill that. We want to get entrepreneurship into schools, and I know we are in the last stages of engaging with the Department of Basic Education to deal with the acute ability education as well as entrepreneurship strategy that they've had for some time. We believe that with the partnership we will be able to deliver that, because it's too late to find someone at the point where they have not experienced with the basic education, higher education, and they're unemployed. And that's the only way that we will be able to compete with countries like Germany, China, and the US, because that entrepreneurship, beyond employment, entrepreneurship is taught at the stage of at least high school, and it's another partnership. It's a partnership that we are very excited. And maybe just to say this, the All Africa Guarantee Fund, we can't understate it, particularly with an audience of women. As Absa, our approach to funding entrepreneurs, particularly women entrepreneurs, we bet on the job, we bet on the person and the potential of the person, not the history, not the fact that they don't have a great credit record, and as a result of the investing in the market. It is completely the concept and how we can recommend it. Thank you.
Two more questions. Some comments is talking about partnerships. Can you tell us about your experience working with programs like She's Next?
Thank you so much. The Visa Shoes Next was really a game changer. So it was a 12 weeks program. Within 8 weeks of being in that program, we've already raised about 7 figures of funding and built really robust features on our app. Now we are at the interesting part of actually getting a buy-in from farmers, which is the most difficult part because you cannot do it like on the computer like you do when you are coding. You have to go there. It's very slow. So it became clear to us that we needed to borrow influence from stakeholders and decision makers that are already doing business with a vast amount of farmers. And we were really hitting brick walls with that. Few weeks, we get a call that we've been shortlisted for Visa Shoes Next, and eventually we win. And one evening, Mpho calls me to say we'll be joining a delegation to London. Then we arrive in London. On the second day, we get a very interesting call that we are invited to a dinner with the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Umama. And lo and behold, she happened to be from a very small town. I can literally walk to her village, but it took a global organization to put together these 2 village girls. So during the dinner, she told us about these programs that government runs, where they avail land, tools, and input supplies to farmers. And she thought that eFama, connecting these group of farmers, would really be that missing link. So we didn't even tell her about that. We researched the program, got in touch with one of the farmers, Farmer Brian. In November last year, when we met him, he was farming 1 acre of land in Deep Slough, just about 20 minutes from our offices. So on Friday, we actually spent the day, Mpho and Absa team and 4 media houses were there. Now he's farming 4 acres. That's 300% growth in production capacity. In less than a year, he employs 70% of women, even though his employment has not really grown, but the access to market and the growth is really stabilizing the jobs and preparing to grow even more, which is a testimony of the ripple effect when you invest in business-led. There's Ukono Dada that spoke about when you invest in men, when you educate a man, you educate an individual. But when you educate a woman, you educate a nation. And I think that our story is really a testament to that. Now we have an ecosystem of 11,000, that's 6,000 small businesses that buy from a group of 5,000 farmers. And we are looking forward to scale that, and 60% of people that benefit there are actually women.
What role do you think policymakers and governments can play in building this inclusive financial ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question because it's really, for me, connected the dots. You know, we hear great stories and they are so inspirational. I think each one of us, you know, as we walk through this journey with her and so many others who are doing incredible things, that's the walking talk that we really want to see. But behind that, the policies and the regulations need to support that business growth. And I think where we really need to see action and change is understanding systemically what needs to change to support these, and that's how the policy level. Yesterday, one of the sessions, someone said, well, actually our policies are in South Africa particularly in place and quite sound. And I reflected on that quite a lot last night because I think that's true, but I do think there's still work to be done around how that meets the current needs of entrepreneurs. And so I think we need to challenge ourselves in the policy space around, as it was said, meeting entrepreneur systems where they're at. And that means potentially taking risks around addressing the concepts that sit behind policies that support things like, when we say financial inclusion, we're not only talking access to finance, are we tackling what does credit risk look like? How do we tackle and support risk mitigation in a different way, which we've seen it before? Because the reality is the current policies and the way they're designed absolutely reference small business, but they don't recognize that if you put into the same credit risk system, you are going to stand out. because we don't fit into that system. And I definitely think our partners, Absa, and others are starting to really tackle the status quo. And also then I think it's about being true to the policies to support the implementation. And I always use the example of innovation. If you say you're innovative, putting in the bean bags into office space isn't enough if the person with a good idea has to go to 4 different forums to get it approved. And similarly, this is what we're talking about here, is that if we say we're going to tackle things at the policy level, there's got to have implementation of policy top of mind. And finally, I think it's up to voices to be heard. And why we're all here today, why we're so, I think, privileged to be in these rooms, is that we need to take a more active role in lobbying, telling the stories of us as ecosystem enablers, of the successes of partnerships, so that we can create some of that change. Because I don't think it's from a place of bad intention, I think it's from a place of things are rapidly changing, and how do we make sure that input is brought back into the policy making. That's where our kinds of discussions like this are really so important.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you for your time. And from this discussion, we can all understand that partnerships are important. No one individual, no one institution can do this on their own. We have to come together. And picking up on what you said, we have to tell our stories. No one will tell the stories for us. I'm amazed by all the things that you're doing so far. Well, how much of what you're doing and what Visa is doing did the public know about? The local rural women who need support. How much of this do they know? And how can we get these stories across to them so that they know that the support is there, the help is there, and all they have to do is reach out. So thank you everyone for listening to us, and I hope you can reach out to them outside and get more information about what they're doing and how you can get in contact with them. And if you know anyone who needs the support that they provide, please feel free to refer them as well. Thank you.
He's in the middle.
Yes, so perfect.